You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio, broadcast from the Philadelphia offices of the law firm Obermayer. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-host Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Matthew Shapiro, Obermayer, Kate Heeman, Prelude Solutions, Alexis Scalzi, Top Stack, and Kayla Murphy, Merrill Lynch. Matthew, can you give us a rundown on who we have on the air today, please?
Sure can, Herb. We have a great show. We have David Delizza, the president and CEO of Pannoni. We have Suzanne Swazzani, the regional president, Greater Philadelphia of Ocean First Bank. We have Shanak Roy, founder and CEO of Yellow Dig, and Jennifer Rodriguez, president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Let's get to know our first guest, David Delizza, president and CEO of Pannoni. David, what is Pannoni?
Pannoni is a consulting engineering firm headquartered in Philadelphia, 35 offices, 1,150 staff, and around $200 million in revenue.
Whoa, this is a large organization. And where'd you grow up originally?
Grew up in Philadelphia in a row house in a blue-collar neighborhood.
Huh. How many brothers and sisters?
I have two older sisters.
Two older sisters. You grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood, and now you're running 1,100. You're the president and CEO of a firm that's 1,150 people doing $200 million. Alexa, what questions you got there?
David, how young were you when you started making money?
About 8 years old.
And how long did you work there?
My family had a corner store. I worked there for about 6 years until I was about 14.
What didn't you do by the time you left there?
I didn't do any of the initial things I started doing when I started, which was sweeping up and those types of things. I ended up more running the business, counting the money, and dealing with the vendors and those types of things.
What does that have to do with what you do today?
I think I just developed an affinity for working with people, relationships, seeing how small business runs. I mean, obviously Pannoni's a lot different, but I think I just kind of learned things. I always enjoyed learning. To this day, I still enjoy learning.
Wait a minute. You started working in your parents' corner store when you were 8 years old. You worked there until you were about 14 when the store closed. And you started stocking shelves and cleaning the floors, and by the time you left, you were running the store?
More or less, yeah.
And you had other people that were reporting to you? Because you said earlier that you weren't doing some of the stuff you were doing when you started?
My sisters chipped in. My parents obviously chipped in. We didn't have any employees other than family members.
So you naturally assumed management control, it sounds like.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Matthew.
So that store is in a neighborhood I know, but our listeners don't. Tell me about that neighborhood.
So, Port Richmond was a blue-collar neighborhood, a river ward, kind of along the Delaware River. I know you're from the city, Matt.
What about the kids? Are there a lot of kids running around that neighborhood?
Yeah. I mean, you're living in a row house, so every house had three, three kids. So if you've got a row of 10 or 20, there's 30 kids running around.
Tell me what you were spending your time doing with those kids.
The usual things: playing stickball, going under the fire plug, running around, play ice hockey, play street hockey.
What was your role in the group? You told us it changed over time.
Well, the group that hung out at the corner store was kind of different age groups. There were a lot of older guys there, and I was one of the youngest. But then as that group kind of graduated from the corner store, I became one of the older guys.
What'd that feel like going from the youngest to the oldest?
It was fun. It was fun because I think a lot of the young kids in the neighborhood kind of looked up to us. And I would hope learned from us that, to behave and be a good citizen in the neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm. What's that have to do with what you're doing nowadays?
Well, I think if you want to call it leadership skills, I think leadership skills developed. My leadership skills were honed at Pannoni as I took on more responsibility.
It sounds to me like you got home working in that corner store and also amongst your friends just naturally. Kate?
Yeah, working in that corner store as a child and a teenager, what did that do for your social life?
My social life was great because even though I was working in a store, a lot of my friends hung there with us. So I saw them constantly. They were playing a pinball machine while I was making a steak sandwich. So
they were attracted to come in there?
Yeah, it was a hangout.
It was a hangout, so okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
What's that have to do with how you've ended up building this team? Wait a minute. How many jobs have you had? How long have you been with Pannoni?
40 years.
So you've been with this organization 40 years. You've risen through the ranks of this organization. Is one of the reasons you've risen through the ranks of this organization because you understand how to build a team and make it fun, just like you did with your friends coming into the store and playing pinball? I mean, they didn't have to come into your store. My bet was they wanted to because you invited them in.
I think there was a lot of that. My parents, who owned the store, we were very well known in the neighborhood. I think the neighbors realized that their kids could come to our store and stay out of trouble. And I just kind of, again, hung out there with them, and
It sounds to me like you're like a magnet. You were like a magnet to your friends in that store, and that's one of the reasons you're the CEO and president of this 1,150 person firm, is because people like working with you.
well, I enjoy people, and I like working with
And
people.
you're also humble because you're not telling us that's why you're there. Because people do like working with you. Shannon?
David, in the green room, you mentioned your Uncle David was someone you always looked up to. Why him?
He was a Vietnam veteran. His real name was David, but we called him Uncle Buck. He was a Vietnam vet. He kind of lived with us for a little while he was coming out of the Army. And he was just a good guy to hang around with.
What did he teach you?
Again, relationships with people. He would take me different places with his friends. He's gone now, but his kids, he has 5 kids, 2 sons who are very close with today.
And what did you learn from Uncle Buck that you bring with you to work every day?
Again, I just think it's respecting people, relationships, and being able to communicate with people.
Kayla?
David, are you more like your mom or your dad?
More like my dad.
Why?
Yeah, my dad was an engineer for the city. I kind of acquired the love of engineering from a young age. He would take me out to projects, bridges that were being built in the city, Girard Avenue, Spring Garden Street Bridge, and I would watch him do his work.
How young were you when your dad was taking you out to look at these bridges?
I'm going to say probably 9 or 10.
And you took an interest in this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that he did was we had a drafting board in our house, and he used to do some side work, urban redevelopment type stuff, designing houses. And I would sit there and watch him drawing on linens, with a pencil. Nowadays it's all done by computer, but I would sit for hours and just watch him designing.
And what's that have to do with the business of Pannoni?
Well, there's a lot of detail involved in running a business like Pannoni. It's picking the right team members. It's understanding the financial side of the business. It's understanding how to grow the business. And I think, I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I try to portray that to the rest of the staff to do the same.
So when you started at Pannoni 40 years ago, who did you report to?
A fellow by the name of Rick Piccoli.
And how does Rick Piccoli remind you of your father?
Well, my dad was a pretty quiet guy. Rick Piccoli was not. But Rick was also a guy that taught us a lot. Every day was a learning opportunity in my mind. Jobs that went well, jobs that didn't go well. Okay, what should we have done better? And he was a mentor, kind of pushed me through the ranks of Pannoni, spent the time with me to learn management of projects, people,
It
clients.
sounds to me like that's what you were doing with the kids in the neighborhood as you got older.
Probably, although I probably didn't know it at the time, but yeah.
You see a parallel there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe one of the reasons Rick Piccoli spent time with you, and maybe one of the reasons you became chairman and CEO, is because you have this natural ability, like he did, to develop people.
Yes. Yeah. I always, Rick and I, he's on our board now, but he and I kid that he had a way of giving you a good butt kicking, but you still felt good about yourself. And again, it was just to teach you things.
And also, it seems to me that that you understand how to build a team naturally, like you were doing with the kids in the neighborhood, with them hanging out at the store, and as you got older. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alexa, what else you thinking there?
How do you today bring that same value to your staff that you did to those kids in the neighborhood?
Well, I think that the best thing that I can do for our staff as the company has grown is to get them to understand there's real opportunity at Pannoni. I try to make them understand that you really need to be a lifelong learner. Our business has changed tremendously. The tools we use have changed. So we try to create programs at the company to support all those things, the culture.
So
David,
the
how-
same thing. Oh, sorry.
How's it feel when you go over a bridge your dad built?
Feels pretty good because I remember being out there at the ribbon cutting. I remember the steel being run across the river, and I can remember him standing out there looking down on the river.
And do you get that same feeling sometimes with projects you've worked on?
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a lot of work in Atlantic City. When my wife and I go down there, I can drive around. I worked on many of those projects that are there today, yeah.
Huh. So you get a lot of joy out of your work.
Absolutely, yeah.
Work doesn't feel like work?
No, it doesn't.
You're running a team of 1,150 people doing like mission critical projects, and you're finding joy in this.
Yes, because I think I have good people in place to help run those 1,150 people.
Well, you had a lot of experience as a kid, inviting your friends into the corner store where they wanted to hang out, and then as you got older in the neighborhood, mentoring the other kids. What's the website address of this organization?
Pennoni, PENNONI.com.
Let me have that one more time.
PENNONI.com.
We've been speaking with David Delizza, who's president and CEO of Pennoni here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be back in a moment right after this break.